At a time when so many of us feel like our connections with people are distant and conversations are surface level, really engaging with each other takes intention. I'm Ashley Gould, the founder of Attend, an elevated, everyday home brand with products that set the table for meaningful spaces and gatherings. Our podcast builds on those spaces through dynamic discussions with open-hearted people, with the goal of sparking conversation around your table. From September through the end of the year, we'll be exploring one of the most universal and unspoken subjects, death and dying. Very few of us know how to prepare for, talk about, and support others through end of life. In this 8-part series, I interview guests whose personal lives and professions are intimately tied to the subject. Join me in an exploration of how to find more peace in preparing for death.
A quick note from the On the Table with Ashley team. This is part 2 of our 2-part episode with Steinberg. If you haven't listened to part 1, we definitely recommend you go and do so before listening to this episode. That episode was released on October 23rd, and it's also linked in the show notes. Enjoy.
So I had a conversation with a woman named Heather Manson who lost her daughter to cancer at 11 years old. And we talked about grief. And one of the things we talked about was, like, how would you like people to show up for you in your grief? And I'd like to ask you the same question. Her answer was, just don't pretend it didn't happen. Like, I know it's hard and it's awkward, but the worst thing you can do is sort of like ignore it. How do you want people to show up for you in grief for your parents' suicide?
What I would say now is to be able to just be frank like we're being and talk about it directly and not hedge around the topics, and just be able to say, okay, this happened. It's not too horrific to talk about. You know, it actually is too horrific not to talk about it. And for the person to be open to learning and also just being present. For instance, one thing is, I remember listening to a podcast with somebody who had also lost family members to suicide. And she made the point that we tend to say committing suicide a lot, like as just a phrase. And she made the point that didn't feel appropriate because we only say commit when it's a crime. We say like commit murder or commit manslaughter, but we don't say commit natural death. So I've ever since then try and say like they took their lives or by suicide. Yeah. So it's those subtle things that if a person can hear that and take it on board, then I feel heard. I think the other thing though, more immediate, like in terms of empathy and presence, if I'm in intense grief and we're together, one of the things that I know I've wanted to know is that I'm not completely ruining your day, ruining your energetic field, because otherwise I'm going to feel like I should just be by myself. I don't want to be around anybody else. I don't want to spread this bad feeling. So it helps when someone else says, you know what, your energy is fine. Like, be where you are. It's no problem. And then I know I can actually be myself and not have to mask and not worry that I'm just kind of a contagion of grief. Because that's what it can feel like, is like, no, don't make me come out of my room and come to the beach with you guys. It will be miserable for all of you. And they need to say, no, it won't be miserable for all of us. It'll be fine, you know?
Yeah. Okay. And I know we're all individuals. And so your experience is going to be different from somebody else's experience. Like, what do people want in the way that people want to be sort of held? But I still think it's helpful to share and to hear. And I think, you know, maybe one big thing is ask, like, how would you feel if people asked you, like, how can I show up for you in grief? Like, that's, if you're okay with that, I feel like that's something we can all do. We just have to have the courage to do it, because nobody wants to make somebody in grief feel worse. And I think a lot of people, it's like this whole death discussion is like, let's just deny that it's ever going to happen. So it's uncomfortable, but if you are okay with people asking you how you would like them to show up, I actually think that's a nice way to have a conversation.
Yeah, it is. And it requires us to be able to state our needs, which a lot of people, we don't know how to do because we've been taught not to have them, or that they're somehow inappropriate or too needy. As a friend of mine said, we don't think of a willow tree as needy just because it needs more water. It's a willow tree. So, it's like your needs are your needs. They don't make you needy. I mean, I know myself, I'm very oriented towards self-sufficiency. It's hard for me to let myself answer that question. Oh, what do I need from you? Oh, well, what do I even need right now? Like, there's a few levels of checking in that might have to happen before I have an answer, and we're all grieving something. I mean, I think in this day and age, no matter who we are, we're all grieving something all the time.
I think that's right. I think that's so right. Let's talk whatever you want to talk about with respect to gender expression and the change of your name and that whole journey. Dylan and I specifically talked about names, and Dylan is Dylan's birth name. Dylan uses they, them pronouns. And Dylan specifically said, like, has no interest in changing their name, like love their name and has like a connection to their name. And we had this interesting discussion, like, what is a name anyway? It's like these sounds and like, it could be anything, right? Like, it's kind of weird that we like put syllables and sounds to a person. But for you, it was important to change your name, not just, the way you interact with the world, but actually like legally to do that. So I'd love to hear about sort of how that came to you and how you knew you wanted to do it legally, and then anything in the sort of gender expression realm that you want to talk about.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, I think for a few years, I had this building sense that my name didn't really suit me. There were too many of me, so to speak. and then I added my middle name to try and differentiate. And then it was way too feminine. And that kind of, and I couldn't get everyone to always use both names anyway, because now we're talking 4 syllables. And then I was just watching other people change their names and change their gender markers. And I was going, like, that seems a lot more fitting. And I was starting to subconsciously feel a little bit jealous of people who were doing that without recognizing, oh, it's something I can do. One of the reasons I didn't see it as something I could do was because I was in a marriage with a certain kind of gender identity attached to it that I felt like, even though it was ostensibly a queer relationship, I felt like I didn't quite have the latitude to explore changing my gender identity so much. When the marriage ended and when I got sober, it was just really clear to me immediately, like, you're being reborn. This is a rebirth. This is a fresh start. This is your moment to say you're a new person. So go ahead and find out what your new name is. And I didn't pick out play. I said, and this is described in episode 3, I literally did say, okay, universe, what's my new name? And I thought, I'll get a clue, and then there'll be another clue, and then there'll be another clue, and this will be a scavenger hunt, and it will be this profound journey that I go on to get my name. And when I get it, it'll be so obvious that it's my name, and I'll love it so much. And I just got playback, like this one word, and I went, okay, that's got to be a clue. That's the first clue. Okay, fine. I have my first clue. I'm ready. And then I went kind of looking for my next clue, and there was no next clue. And I tried to force it, like, can I translate play into every other language in the world and find out which one is the clue? And, I'm typing play into Google Translate and going through all these languages and going, nope. It's none of this. I'm not getting a hit. No tingles, And finally I realized this is actually the answer to my question already right here. And I was really not having it. I mean, I love play and I love playfulness and I love all the things that play means. And I also, especially at that time, took myself so seriously and took everything so seriously, and life or death and black and white, which is a really alcoholic way of thinking, anyway, but I didn't know that then. And play was not something you would associate with me as like a constant state. It was a thing that you might say, oh yeah, sometimes they're playful. But I had to relearn how to play as an adult, kind of on purpose. If it was like a team sport, I could do it. But that's competition also. It's not just play. If it was just go play outside, I had lost those skills. Learn to juggle or something that's just play for play's sake. I had lost those skills. So when I finally got to a place of surrender about the name, the way I depict this in the comic, it's a little bit like Jacob wrestling with the angel of God, because I had to give in and go, all right, you win. It's play. I'm renamed, just as Jacob gets renamed Israel, which means God wrestler. So there's this sense of, all right, this is a name for me to grow into. I don't necessarily embody all of what it means right now, but it's kind of like the way Frank Lloyd Wright builds houses. He doesn't design a house for who the client is today. He designs a house for who the client is going to grow into being 30 years down the road. And I think that's a little bit what the name is like. It's something for me to continue to grow into. And so it was really clear to me that I should change it legally and just not have any of this baggage of my old name and any having to negotiate what I was called with anybody. Mm-hmm. That this was about cleaning up and kind of rebirthing, and not about installing new traumas or opportunities for trauma. And the same thing with the pronouns. As long as I was changing my name, it was just, oh, this is the same paperwork. If I want to change to non-binary pronouns, these are the same forms. I don't need to pay this $800 twice. I'll just do this now. And that just felt very liberating, just to say, okay, I'm X. In California, it's X, unspecified. It's like, okay, that's fantastic. I'm not gender transitioning. I'm not taking hormones, and I don't actually, as of now, plan to start hormone therapy at any point. But I feel very gender fluid and non-binary and queer. And so X suits me just fine. And I like to joke that, when it says NB as the initials in Latin, when it says NB, it's nota bene, which is pay attention. And I like that idea that, like, my gender is pay attention. Yeah, so I changed it legally when I changed my name, and it just happened to be that all legally went through and got approved in 2022, right before Mom's passing.
And so it's been a couple of years, almost a couple of years?
Yeah, it's been 2 years, yeah.
And does it still feel good? Like, does it feel like place is sticking?
Oh yeah, it totally feels good. It feels, it's to the point where, when you hear your name, your ears prick up. And play gets said for a lot of reasons besides my name, because it's a word, it's a noun.
Right.
And I mean, it's a verb, it's all these things. So my ears will prick up sometimes when someone says play and it's not me. And I kind of that tickles me, that I go, oh yeah, it's totally become my name all the way.
I love that story. And it sounds like other people are learning from you, from your story and your experience. Is there anything else you want to talk about in terms of gender expression and queerness? One of the focuses of my podcast and my company, Amatand, is increasing curiosity and decreasing judgment. In the discussion that I had with Dylan Williamson, one of the things Dylan said is they really want to know that people are coming to any discussion about their queerness from a place of curiosity and hopefully love. And in those circumstances, Dylan is always happy to have a conversation and interested in having a conversation, but that it can be exhausting and it takes a lot of energy, and to, hopefully people are using the right pronouns, but are they even thinking about it? And, that we still have like a long ways to go as a society.
I'll say, I think my name helps me with this a lot, because I don't get to take myself seriously with a name like play. And I don't get to be bent out of shape when someone screws up my pronouns, because I can't, I can't with a straight face say, I'm play, damn it. I like non-binary pronouns, but I don't get bent out of shape whatever pronoun someone uses for me, because my MO is basically, I'm taking triggers off. That's my work. I'm here to heal. I'm here to grow spiritually and to evolve. And that means deactivating buttons that are installed on me that I got wherever I got them along the way. And one of those big buttons is gender, and pronouns is another big button that I think it's great that people can choose their pronouns now in such an open way where folks understand that it's respectful to ask someone else their pronouns. I think that's fantastic. At the same time, I think we've kind of gone about it in a way that's unfortunately essentialist, like going, like regressive feminist essentialist kind of, by attaching so much to them.
Mm-hmm.
And then they end up being opportunities for further wounding instead of what they're supposed to be, which is tools for liberation.
Yeah.
And that's why I personally say, call me whatever you want. If I walk into a room and I get sirred, I'm like, that's awesome. I just got sirred. I think it's fantastic. I'm not a guy. I'm not a he. I don't really use he, him pronouns unless I'm in drag. But if I get a sir, I think it's made my day. Just because it's like, oh, I got to play all the way over here. For a minute, you gave me all the privilege and power that there is. Like, thank you. And when people she, her, me, I'm okay. Sometimes I'm more squeamish about it than others. Sometimes I really don't care. But in any case, I pretty much don't correct them. And when someone asks me what pronouns should I use, and I say, it's none of my business how you misgender me, they get upset because they want it. They want an answer. They want to be able to be right and not be wrong. And that to me is like you're falling back into the trap again of binary, if you want to be right or wrong.
I mean, I think that's a very interesting point. I think that a lot of people just want to be respectful. And then there are definitely people who do get offended, very offended if they're misgendered. I think there's like I want to get it right kind of thing. But I also agree that it's sort of like Dylan said, like, why do we even have names in the first place? Like, we're all here. Let's just be who we are and be together. So in terms of your own journey, did you know or feel like when you were young that you didn't fall into sort of like the binary, or was it when you were older?
No, I definitely had gender dysphoria, and I was what everyone would call a tomboy, and I never liked that label. It just felt like it was demeaning somehow and missing the mark on how I actually felt. When I came out, I was 13, but that was 1993, so queer wasn't in our vocabulary yet. It was, neither was pan or trans or fluid. None of those were words in our vocabulary yet. We had gay, straight, and bi. Those were the choices. And that was kind of it. And when I found the word queer and I found queer theory and I started understanding what queerness means politically and culturally and socially, not just as a sexual orientation or a gender identity, but a way of being in the world where you find the edge of things and you push on them, and you find where there's a conceptual limit and you transcend that limit, and you find when something needs to be reinvented and you reinvent it so that it can survive, which is, by the way, what Judaism does, and you understand that as queerness, then suddenly you're in this really rich terrain. So as soon as I came into queer knowledge space, I went, oh, queer, that's what I am.
Okay. Well, I want to move into religion. We have a lot to talk about in religion. In Bereshit, when you start your webcomic, Father.Mother.God, you start it with the Hebrew letters and a reference to God. In later chapters, you delve more into religion. In the second chapter, the title of the second chapter is A Psalm, and you're talking with God about life. In your fourth chapter, which is titled Fire and Water, you discuss religion further, and you quote Psalm 27:10, "Though my father and my mother have forsaken me, the Lord will take me in." And then in your latest chapter titled Losing My Religion, you share your return to and then away from Christianity as an adult. So I know that you spent 17 years as a Buddhist. You were born into the Christian faith and came back to the Christian faith for a while. And now you came to a decision in the last couple of years to formally convert to Judaism. I know for sure that this has been one element of your healing journey, and it's obviously had its own twists and turns. In one of our conversations, you described it as a Buddhist, Christian, Jewish love triangle, which I was like mentally like, okay, we definitely need to talk about that.
I was born into a family where I could have been raised Catholic or Jewish, but mom was in charge, so it was Catholic. And I always, as a kid, had this underlying sense that I couldn't quite put a name on, but it was basically I would have made a better Jew. It was like, why are we only Jewish at our grandparents' house for Passover and Hanukkah when that stuff seems way cooler than what we do in church every Sunday? But I always had this spiritual bent. I remember as a kid reading this series of books, and I can't for the life of me remember what they are, but they were basically about this kind of monastic hermit figure who lived by himself, and the children would follow him and he would give them lessons. It was kind of, this, I think he was like a desert father's kind of figure, but I just ate that stuff up. And when I came out at 13, I basically had a falling out with the Catholic Church because I understood there's no home for me here as a soon to be called queer, person, finding my words and everything else, finding my gender identity. There's not a home for me here. I'm way too much of an independent thinker anyway, even if I didn't just say I liked girls. And that kind of threw me into an existential crisis that I think grew over the next couple of years. I can't say, my mental health kind of breakdown of my senior year of high school wouldn't have happened had I still been in the church. I'm not going to say that, but I think that it's very dangerous to go through adolescence without some kind of spiritual foundation. It just makes that whole rite of passage that much more fraught. And so mine was very. And so I kind of picked my way through, and then there was a little bit of I Ching and a little bit of Tao Te Ching and a little bit of ancient Egyptian philosophy. I was just kind of testing things that I could and reading some Buddhist books, but going, I mostly don't understand what this is saying. I'm putting this back down. But this is, bookmark this for later. And after college, I found the United Church of Religious Science and spent a couple years attending services and taking classes there in Los Angeles. And it wasn't until I was in Ireland on my Fulbright that I finally found kind of the open door into Tibetan Buddhism. And I went, this is what I was looking for.
How did you find it?
I was in a hostel in the south of Ireland in Cork. And it was kind of the Christmas, New Year's, holidays window. I didn't have to be back in Dublin yet. In this hostel, in the kitchen was a postcard advertising another hostel out on the Beara Peninsula that happened to be at a Buddhist retreat center. And I just thought, a hostel at a Buddhist retreat center, I should go there. And I went, and it ended up, what ended up happening was I called them and they said, we have a retreat going on and the hostel's full, but you could stay in town and you could come up for the retreat. And we're sure you'll find someone in town who can take you up to the retreat every day. It was like get in a little minivan that is run by a private family that goes a couple of days a week out to Castletown Bear and go and stay in a hostel who won't answer their telephone, so you don't know if you actually have a bed. And then assume that in that hostel you're going to meet people with a car who are going to also be going to the same retreat 7 or 8 kilometers outside of town, and they're going to drive you there every day. That was a lot of iffy maybes for me. And I just had a yes on all of it. And I went, and I literally, as soon as I went down into the hostel kitchen, I met the women who were going to drive me to the retreat every day. It was like it all just clicked into place. But I ended up there, and they had a center in Dublin. And so when I went back to Dublin, I started taking courses and just studying. And it was really clear that it was like, stick around. Here is a path from zero to enlightenment that you can follow. It's structured. It's graduated. It's step by step. It's all inclusive, like all inclusive package to enlightenment. Everything you need is going to be right here. Just stick around and do your homework and do your meditation and do your practices. And and I did that. And I did for 17 years. And I still love the Sangha, and I still love the teachings, and I deeply respect them, and they're incredibly important to me. And the only reason I really can say I backed away from being an active member with the Sangha is that when I got sober, it was so uncomfortable to sit still suddenly overnight that my meditation practice just totally fell apart. 2, I a little bit felt like my ex-wife got the Sangha in the divorce. Like I didn't really want to be sharing that space. And 3, I really needed community in person right then, not like this community that's all online virtually. I was in a new town, in a new setting, in a new name, in a new sobriety, all these new things. And I needed people in person. And the people who were available in person in a small town in Northern California are Christians.
So how did you go from, okay, I'm going to be baptized in I don't know, was it Catholic or Protestant in the
Christian.
church?
Yeah. Christian Bible church, like evangelical, to total
okay,
evangelical Bible church.
Okay, yeah. So you were baptized in an evangelical church in your local community. You had local community. And then, like, how did you say, but now I know I need to move to Judaism and I want to convert?
It was kind of that things that I was letting skate around not be an issue I stopped being able to skate around them. I was having conversations with my Christian family around issues of gender and sexuality, for instance, and they were good conversations, and they were the kind of bridge building conversations that before the Christians I would never have been even willing to have. I would have just written them off as wrong, and not even bothered. But because of what I've learned in recovery and because of what I experienced with the Christians, I was willing to go, all right, let's have these hard conversations. Let's actually talk like queer person to evangelical person about gender identity. And it's not like I was going to get any of them to show up at the Pride Parade, but I was making progress. I was like watching myself have an impact, and yet I thought that I would have even more of an impact than I could. And meanwhile, no one was taking that great of an interest in understanding me. They were just going, why would you use the word queer? That's such an offensive term. And like not be able to hear anything that I said about it. And, think that I'm just talking about sex when I'm talking about so much more than sex. And, I was single for the most of that year. So it was all kind of like, okay, fine, agree to disagree. And then I started dating someone, and then everyone's concern about me turning back towards, the ways that will lead me to hell just kind of became so much more that I could bear, that going to church was no longer something that filled me. It was something that made me feel like I had to recover from it afterwards. And the concern in everybody's eyes was something that I just couldn't stomach. And the people that would have been supportive were somehow out of touch, out of reach. And so I just didn't have a way that was comfortable at all to pursue Christianity. And I was kind of like, well, look, maybe it served its purpose. It saved my life for the year that it saved my life. And I mean, it's a very compelling and beautiful tradition in a lot of ways. And there are certain elements of it that I find really wonderful, and I miss them. But they come at this cost, not just of conformity, but of needing somebody else to be wrong.
Yeah.
And I don't want a spiritual path that requires someone else to be wrong for me to walk my path. And Judaism doesn't make anybody wrong. Judaism has got more questions than answers.
Yeah, for sure. So you're doing your conversion work virtually. Mm-hmm. Is that correct? So yeah. Did you just one night you're like, I'm going to send an email to this person, or like what happened?
Well, we'd had a conversation in person, and I kind of filled her in a little bit about what was happening with the church. And she sort of just she just tossed it out and said, well, if you want to convert, I'll convert you, but you totally don't need to do that. And it just stuck in my mind. And I think it was several months later when I wrote to her and I said, about that conversion thing, I think it's time to actually do it. And she immediately said, great, you're on, let's go.
Okay. And how long I feel like converting is sort of like becoming a citizen. It's like you're born a citizen and you do nothing. If you convert or if you become a citizen, it's like so much work. So, I was born Jewish. Well, actually, I had to be converted technically because my mother's mother was not Jewish. But so I was converted when my mother remarried, technically. But I didn't have to do what you're doing. So tell me a little bit about like what does it look like to convert? Like what is that workload, study load, path, all of that?
Because we're working one-on-one and not even in a little cohort, it's basically like private graduate school.
Okay.
I'm reading a bunch of the books that my rabbi read when she was in school.
Rabbinical school? Okay.
School. And we're studying them together and hashing them out, and I'm answering questions about, she's got like journal prompts around for each of them that I'm answering. And we just are churning through these books pretty much as fast as I can read them. And then there are other elements that come in when they come in, like go and, have a field trip to San Francisco and go to an actual service, because here there's not a whole lot. There's a Reformed synagogue that has service every other week, but I just don't totally jive with it. I want a little bit more meat on my bones than a Reformed service gives me, or I want it to be totally like renewal and earth-based and, way hippy-dippy and out there wilderness Torah kind of thing, which, if I lived in Sebastopol or Berkeley or someplace else would be so easy to find. But here it's a little not. So it's kind of take a field trip now and then. The going to the meditation retreat felt like a really big piece of augmenting the study that we're doing together with the more spiritual side of the practice side, and we talk about my prayer life and how do I observe Shabbat, or how do I observe different holy days and what am I doing for them, and just having an open exploration of how that process is emerging. And
is there like a test? Is there an end?
It'll culminate with a mikveh and a beit din. Mikveh is a ritual bath. It's kind of like the Jewish version of a baptism, I guess you could say. And that is shaping up to be in the Pacific Ocean in December, which will be chilly. And then, and the Lake Tahoe would be chilly then too. So it's fine. And the Beit Din is a rabbinical court. That's what it technically means, but it's 3 learned Jews or rabbis who are helping you assess your readiness or where you are on the path of becoming Jewish. It's not like you're defending your dissertation. Although I think walking into it probably feels a little bit like that until they start asking questions. It's more friendly than that.
Okay.
So one of them will be my rabbi, and then there'll be 2 others. And then there's a few prayers that are said, and, then it's okay. Now you're officially Jewish, even though you're already Jewish in a way. I mean, my mom wasn't Jewish, but I just found out that my great grandfather on my mom's side is Jewish, which my mom never even knew when she was alive. So I'm more, that makes me by blood more than 50% Jewish now, which is kind of a cool insight to have emerged while on this conversion journey. Nonetheless.
So how long in total will that be? Like 2 years or?
It's less than 2 years. It's a little bit more like 1 and change.
Okay. And so the rabbi that you're working with on a regular basis at some point is going to say, play, you're ready. Is that how it works?
It can be like that, or it can be like, you're ready when you finish all the books that we have set out to read. But we picked December as a target based on the fact that she'll be in the Bay Area, because she's a lot out of the country right now. So we said, well, look, why don't we plan this for December, whether we're done with the studies or not? And then we said, well, it doesn't matter if you're done with the studies, because what happens after you get converted is you just keep studying anyhow. So even if you're not done with the studying, we can convert you and you can just keep studying. So that's how it came about.
Okay.
It's like why not do it? Which is also really beautiful, because I really would like it if the mikveh could make it into the comic And since I want to be finishing out the storyline by December, it would be really helpful if the mikvah happened in the beginning of December. You know, that's just one of those God shot kind of things. Like, could this please happen on, say, December 8th, just so that, which is actually my partner's birthday, so that might not be a great day. But, you know, could it please happen in early December so that I can draw it, so that it can be in the story, right?
When do you spend the most time with the people you love? For us, it's at home, around the dinner table with family, or sipping cocktails in the living room with friends. So why not make that time even more meaningful by imbuing your gatherings with pieces that not only make connecting easier, but spark conversation around your table? Amaton's collection of small batch, artisan, quality-made pieces for tabletop and home are not only made for simple serving, they're works of art designed for daily use. Whether you're hosting a dinner party or sitting down for family game night, our collections create a sense of presence and peace in every home. Shop our collection of dinnerware, drinkware, serveware, and more at Father.Mother.God. That's AMEATENDRE.com. Gather by design.
So do you feel like your conversion is sort of like your name? Like once you accepted, okay, play is the name, it was just like obvious. So you've been studying now for, you know, a while. Does it feel the same? Like this is for sure it?
I feel like I'm already Jewish, but there's paperwork to do. It's a little bit like the name change where I already changed my name, but now I have to wait for the California government to recognize my name change. And then I have to go to the Office of Social Security in Reno and get a new Social Security card. And then I can get a driver's license. You know, it's like all these extra steps, but I already know my name's changed, but that somehow endorses the name change so that other people recognize it.
Okay.
So it feels like a transition from something that's a personal truth to a more of a community-based truth.
And you talked about how, I mean, religion writ large, I think, has been a big part of your journey and your healing. How do you feel like Judaism, and I want to get into divorce camp and tashlich, which I really felt was so beautiful. You talked about on another podcast, but how do you feel like Judaism in particular has been part of your healing process?
There's something about I could say all the years that I was practicing Buddhism, but I would find a community Seder to go to every Passover. And I wouldn't be with family, but I would feel like everybody there was family. I would be with people that most of the time I didn't even know. Maybe I'd seen them the year before at that same Seder, and that was literally it. But it felt like something so familiar and so ancient that I could drop into, that I could say was mine, that heals the sense of discontinuity and rupture that exists in my family line. And I feel like now it's the same, but only more so. It's like it's healing my dad's family line specifically. It's healing my mom's family line now that I know that there's Jewishness there too, but also because there's the sense that, I mean, both my parents fell away from their spiritual paths and their religious inclinations as they got older. They both kind of fell into this sort of hopelessness, sort of existential hopelessness, like a really agnostic kind of a state of, I don't know, and I don't know if it's worth knowing, and I wish I could know. You know, my mom was sort of like, I wish I could believe. Things would be so much easier if I could believe in something. And I would say, like, you can choose to believe in something. Like, pick something to believe in. It doesn't even matter what it is. Just try it out. See if it helps. And it's just that leap of recognizing, I can choose to try out a belief system and see if it even works, was too much. And for me, it feels like I get to repair that by actively choosing a belief system that works for me. Not saying, okay, Judaism is a belief system, because it is not. It is not a singular thing at all. And I'm not choosing a belief system. I'm choosing like a history to grapple with more than anything, and saying, okay, I don't understand this. I'm going to grapple with it. I think I disagree with most of it. And yet in doing so, I'm coming closer to God.
Yeah. Sounds like Judaism. So I don't know if you're planning to cover your divorce in the webcomic, but you haven't yet. I don't think it's been mentioned yet, but you do talk openly about it. And you've been on several podcasts where you've talked about it. And you talk about, well, you call it divorce camp. I don't think it was called divorce camp at Camp Tawanga a year or two ago. And by the way, I used to go to Camp Tawanga as a camper when I was young. So I know the physical space that you are in. And you shared on another podcast your tashlich experience. And I personally really connected with that experience. So just to help orient listeners, tashlich, which is Hebrew for to cast, is inspired by the biblical passage Micah 7:18-20. God will hurl all our sins into the depths of the sea. And while I was raised Jewish, I'm not observant today. I married a Catholic and I moved to Park City, Utah during COVID. And I personally find my own spirituality in the mountains, in nature. However, I am culturally very Jewish and my family is Jewish and I don't go back to Seder every year, but whenever I can, to be with family, I do. I go to, I celebrate the holidays. And Rosh Hashanah remains one of my favorite Jewish holidays, and Tashlich is one of my favorite Jewish ceremonies. So traditionally, it occurs on the first afternoon of the Jewish New Year, near the edge of flowing water, although water is not required. And in my family, we would throw crumbs of bread into the water to symbolize the sins of the past year that we wanted to rid ourselves of. And more broadly, like anything weighing us down that we didn't want to take with us into the new year, which we all have. And then you watch as it floats away on the water. And Rosh Hashanah marks the beginning of the Jewish High Holy Days, a 10-day period of introspection and repentance. Tashlich serves as a physical manifestation of the internal process of seeking forgiveness and starting anew, and an opportunity to reorient oneself for the coming year as you would like it to begin. So what I loved about the divorce camp was that you took, or whoever organized it, took Jewish concepts like tashlich and then applied them to your healing in your divorce.
The Divorce and Discovery program, which is its actual name, Divorce and Discovery.
Okay.
They won a covenant grant to fund expansion beyond the camp model to doing something that can be brought to a local synagogue or JCC and run as a kind of a weekend program for people in the community that don't have the wherewithal or the interest to maybe go all the way to Camp Tawanga.
Yeah.
So they're doing that kind of year round now, they're building the infrastructure to do that. And I would say if you're divorced, even if it's not recent and there's any baggage left, go to divorce camp. Because we took all the Jewish rituals that exist and then we pointed them towards the grief and loss and hurt and regret and whatever else there might be that comes from the failure of a marriage. And when they introduced the practice of tashlich to us, of course, many people there knew of it because of being raised Jewish, but I didn't know of it being not raised that Jewish. And so it was this, oh great, we're going to throw something into the river and let go of our marriage. And I had brought my wedding ring with me to divorce camp, hoping that there would be some opportunity to do something with it, to let go of it, because it was just sitting around. It was sitting at the bottom of my God box, which is a box where I put prayers, which is a kind of a 12-step piece of technology that's incredibly advanced yet very primitive at the same time. My first God box was a Tupperware container, and it worked. So I brought my wedding ring, and when they introduced the tashlich, I asked one of the instructors, "Would it be okay if I threw my ring into the river?" And she said, "Oh yes, that's great." And so I had to go ahead, to throw my ring in the river. I wanted to just make sure that it was even allowed. But when we had the ceremony, they encouraged people to pick up bark or leaves or needles or stones or whatever we could find on the forest floor to symbolically, launch and I skipped that part because I'd brought my ring with me, and so then just found a spot on the edge of the river that seemed fitting, and then when I was ready to, I cast the ring into the river, and it sunk down to this very deep spot. And then we followed the tashlich with the mikveh and this ritual bath, and it turned out that the spot where they set the women upstream or the women downstream and the men upstream and the non-binary folks were somewhere in the middle. And there weren't that many there were 3 of us. And we went literally to exactly the spot that I had just cast my wedding ring and did the mikveh right there, which was just perfect.
And how did you feel afterwards?
I felt like my divorce had been accomplished. Mm-hmm. Before then, it felt like it was taking a lot of my emotional energy. I hadn't been able to rally myself to actually deal with the paperwork and legally filing. And after that, I just went, oh, well, now it's just paperwork. That's easy, and it just became straightforward and nothing big to handle. Just fill it out and do it, and it's not going to stump me, and it's not going to emotionally hang me up anymore. So it felt like I can point to my wedding and say, this is the moment when we became married. And I can point to my tashlich and say, this is the moment when I became divorced.
And do you think was it a week? Was the whole experience a week?
Not even. No, I think it was a long weekend, maybe 3, maybe 4 nights. 3 nights probably.
In those 3 nights or, however long it was, maybe you could share a few other things that you did? Like, did it enable you to look back? Like you said, when you left your marriage, you weren't even sure like what you were doing or why. Did it help you kind of look back and understand yourself better?
I think I was in a space where I knew I wasn't ready to date anyone yet, but it definitely helped me know that I would be ready when the time came. I sort of had allotted myself a certain number of months that I wasn't going to entertain any dating ideas, no matter what or who came along. And divorce camp happened kind of within that window. But there was this sense of like, now I'm healthier and more ready for a relationship when that does present itself.
So what were some of the other things that you did? I'm sure there was singing.
Yeah, there was lots of singing.
And then I think you said you could like choose, it was kind of like choose your own adventure. Like you could choose to do this or choose to do that.
Yeah. One of them was sitting Shiva for your marriage.
Whoa.
Yeah. Which is like, have you just sat to grieve the death of this as though it were a passing? And we just sat together and then shared some quiet reflections, but it was just a space for people to literally come and sit down and actually grieve a death. And there was a mezuzah making workshop for people who wanted a new mezuzah because they wanted a scroll that wasn't the one that they'd had with their spouse in their house.
So just for listeners, Shiva is a 7-day period of mourning after somebody dies. Traditionally in Judaism, where the mourners stay in the house and then friends and family come into the house and there's prayers at specific times, etc. And then a mezuzah is a physical object that you put on your door that has prayers inside of it. So just for people who don't know what those things are. I'm so glad that Tawanga is doing that and that they're trying to sort of like broaden it so that more people can experience it. So you've put a lot of effort to, and I really love how you put this on the landing page of your webcomic, channeling wholeness out of separation and insight out of darkness. Can you tell us a little bit about the process of creating the webcomic? And it's clearly doing a lot for you. Like, it sounds like you've really broken through some healing with your father and maybe some other things as well. In one of the podcasts that you were interviewed on, you shared how the title Father.Mother.God came to you. And I would love to hear about sort of your experience with the webcomic, which I really, really encourage listeners to go look at it. Honestly, it won't take very long, and it's powerful visually, artistically, and through the words. And I really, like, we can't do it justice talking about it. But I think hearing about like your process, you also have told me like it takes a lot of your energy, which I think both because it's autobiographical and you're working through these things, and then just the artistic part of it probably too. So I would just love to hear a little bit about like the process and what it's doing for you.
Yeah, sure. Well, to start with the title, I mean, I'm using intuition as a huge component of how I'm doing all of this. And the title was no different. I had a list that was very exhaustive and somewhat exhausting of ideas that I knew were all wrong. And, you know, and then I just went on a walk and it came to me out of the blue. I just made it to the beach, and it was like, oh, that's the title. Okay, fine. The way that I've drawn each episode in terms of my method has really been kind of emergent. The first episode, I had no idea what I was drawing from one panel to the next. I kind of had a vague idea that it was starting in the beginning, and that was all I sort of knew. When I get stuck, sometimes I look at old photographs, because if all else fails, I know I can work on drawing pictures that I might use later. And that's actually how I started before I began formally drawing the comic, was just drawing family photos. And some of those I've gotten to use, and some of them I haven't yet. I've gotten lucky a couple times where I have had something that resembled a script for the episode and just used and was able to go, okay, here's all the words. Now what are the pictures? The second episode is actually an example of that, the Psalm, because that was a prayer poem that I had written at Camp Twanga, at divorce camp. And it occurred to me, oh, this needs to be in the comic. This kind of sets up my relationship with God. And so I had all the words. And then the question was, well, what the heck pictures go with these words? Because this is pretty abstract stuff. And then as I would draw, I would discover things in the drawings that might unlock another level of healing or insight that might then set me back to having to stop drawing and go ahead and grieve and cry and go for a walk or make some phone calls or something else before I could go back and resume the drawing again. There's a lot of, it's a total misnomer to call it inactive time, but there's a lot of creative time that's not spent on my iPad or my computer drawing or writing words that is part of making the comic.
Yeah. Yeah. And then at the end of the year, I think you're like, it'll be enough.
I think for this iteration, yeah, because you had the question of, well, what if you continued it and you can go deeper? And I think I will go deeper in some way, but it might be a totally different format than this. It might be more podcasting. It might be something else, but not to keep drawing it this way.
Yeah. So you shared that you had some poems that you wrote for your parents.
Oh.
Did you want to share one or more of those?
There's a couple poems that I have from when my parents were still alive. So the poems about my dad are kind of disappointed. The last poem I ever wrote to my dad, actually, it was like another attempted intervention, I suppose. I recorded myself reading it and then sent the recording to him and never heard back. It's called Spring Rain. Oppressive, the unshouldered weight of your impotence builds and surrounds us, while you cling to innocence. Skies thunder closer, with thick atoms smashing, the storm clouds start clapping, the tree branches snapping, the lightning unlatches the darkness inside. For a moment, I see you. Then weakness collides into danger, while you rearrange our familial connection, withdraw the extension, familiar conventions undone, till the only thing left us is tension. Thunderclaps roll, the air vibrates with vibrance, the earth speaking freely while you dwell in silence. Remind us, say something, or aren't you the father, the farther, the further, the wordless deserter? Afraid of your shadow, afraid of conviction, you turn on your children and cling to your fiction. Read my lips, hear my words, feel my voice, taste my diction. Barely a space between foreground and background, opinions and facts, how to live this or back down. I can't and I won't trade in braveness for blindness. You could, but you don't try to save this with kindness. And by saving, I much more mean you than myself, for it's you that you're losing. to somebody else. While the storm wreaks its havoc inside your own house, the mere threat of your panic eclipses your doubts, leading you to betray us to somebody else, and you're doing this all in the name of your spouse? So now I'm the one, powerless, except for my prayers that I one day forgive you for all of these errors, that along you and with you we right what's not fair, that your children can once again claim what is theirs. So if I set the future adrift from the past and I forego your shortfalls and forgive your ass for the choices you've made by not choosing to listen, not choosing to think, not choosing decisions that serve you, if only because they unnerve you, well, I still deserve you. The you that you've lost to a fear of revision. I want that you back, and you need him, so listen. I know that it's in you, for all creatures have it, the seed of new learnings, the chance for new habits. To be almost found equals totally lost. I will pray to absolve you no matter the cost, but after the storm comes rebuilding, not silence, comes filling, not violence, comes willingness, smiles, and the strength to admit that some actions need changing. If you want your kids back, then now start rearranging your life and its meaning. It's time for spring cleaning. The storm clouds are clearing, the light is revealing. There are branches you've broke in our family tree, but the roots still run deep, and the sap still flows free. So take this as an invite to come, speak with me.
Wow, that's incredibly powerful. And as you're reading it, I was thinking a couple of things. One is that now, through your webcomic, you are approaching forgiveness for him, which is beautiful. And, you know, the roots are deep. They're whatever issues we have with loved ones, like especially family, like the roots are there, and like he will always be your father, whether he's here or not. And I just think it's so admirable, all the work that you're doing to truly grieve and to move. I don't want to say move through it because you never get over it, but it's like to live with it maybe in a peaceful way, and to be able to forgive him. I'm a big believer that when we hold on to pain that somebody else has caused us, we're really hurting ourselves at the end of the day. And so when you being able to let go of that and to forgive him is also healing yourself. We've talked about a lot of things. I wanted to just give space if there was anything else you wanted to talk about. You know, when I kind of wrote to you and I said, what are the things that are important to you? You named personal transformation, bravery, authenticity, and diversity. I think we've actually covered all of those things, but I just wanted to pause and see if there was anything else you wanted to cover.
I mean, there's one thing I'll say about bravery, I guess, which is like the bravery to transform and to be transformed. I wrote about this a little bit in the baptism episode where, you know, the last place I wanted to go was church. And so that's where I went. This sense of being strong enough to be willing to change. I think it's so important today because it's so easy to get stuck in, binary thinking, and being willing to change breaks that down. You know, it adds more colors to the spectrum of who we actually are and how we can show up. And it allows for contradiction and paradox, which I think they're really important elements, by complicating things instead of letting things be complicated and simple at the same time. It's really important. Yeah.
And I think like increasing our curiosity again is like the first step on that road. And so I really encourage people to refine their curiosity. So at the end of every episode, I like to ask the same 5 questions of my guests. But before I do that, I'd love to chat just a little bit about the items that I sent you from my company, Amatand. which, as we talked about before, means to take care of your soul in French. So I sent you 2 of our taupe appetizer bowls. They're ceramic and hand thrown in Utah. And they're, I like to say, kind of like Goldilocks size. Like they're just perfect for so many things like granola or hummus or avocado or nuts. And also one of our wooden spoons, which we designed, which is perfect for use in the appetizer bowl. A couple of Italian chocolate bars, which are amazing. We met the family at a trade show in Paris that we went to. And then strawberry rhubarb jam and lemon curd that are both from the Hudson Valley. I actually recently made for the 4th of July some bars with the strawberry rhubarb jam, and everybody loved them. And then I also sent you our Have I Told You Lately stationery. So we didn't talk about this, but my mom had a stationery and gift shop growing up. So writing notes was always a big thing for us. And I love people sending handwritten notes. And then lastly, our cocktail napkins, the You Can Go Anywhere from Anywhere napkins, which I thought you would enjoy. So would love to hear any comments you have on them, and then we'll jump into the questions.
Yeah, I mean, everything was such a delight. First of all, I just love the fact that starting with the box, you can see the personal touch because you have customized your packing tape. And then you open it, and then the packing materials are like this beautiful present, all this kind of natural fiber sort of materials. So it was really fun just to open it up. And then the bowls are fantastic. I love the shape and the feel of them in my hand. And I am a small spoon fanatic. So
oh, good.
That was like perfectly at home with some other small spoons. It's great. And it has a really good mouthfeel. The chocolate bars did not last long. We just demolished them. We did really well, and we ate one day and one the next day, but there was no holding back. And the lemon curd also, I thought, I'll make something to put this on. I even made biscuits for my birthday to make strawberry shortcake, and I thought I'll save some and put lemon curd on them. And I'm just eating it straight out of the container with a little spoon.
Perfect.
Yeah. And I love this stationery because writing cards and writing letters feels like such a lost art. In fact, I just wrote a letter to somebody this week that I don't know, whose work I admire, and on their website they say, you can't email me, I won't respond, but if you're really inclined, here's my P.O. box. And so I wrote a letter, and I just thought, it's so rare that we even do that anymore. So I love the opportunity to write some little notes to people.
Amazing. I'm so glad you enjoyed it. Okay, last 5 questions. You've been such a champ. This is a marathon. Okay, so as we explore in my brand en matant, objects can hold a lot of meaning for us. They can tie us to the past, enable us to enjoy the present moment more, or even take us into the future. Can you share an object from your life, whether you still have it or not, that holds a lot of meaning for you, and tell us why?
Yeah, this is such a good question. I had to really think about it. But what I want to share with you is the binoculars that I have. They came from my friend Marie, who is the woman I mentioned earlier, whose dad also took his life. And so they belonged to him. And she gave them to me when I moved away from Austin. Actually, she gave them to me well before then, but then she let me keep them when I moved away from Austin. And there's something that remind me of that friendship, but also of my mom and her love for birding. And they tend to live under the driver's seat of my car, so I can pull them out at a moment's notice and bird watch.
Amazing. That's beautiful. Thank you. Can you share a favorite tradition? It could be something from when you were a child or something you do now.
One of my favorite traditions that I do now is observing Sukkot, which is it's one of my favorite of the Jewish holidays. Basically, you get to camp outside in your backyard or your front yard. The biblical commandment is to live in booths. And the first year that I observed it, I used my back porch, and last year I used my front porch. And I haven't gotten so far as to build a proper kind of roof across the top, although the roof isn't supposed to keep anything out anyway. So it's just an opportunity that I can actually treat my indoor house like it's impermanent and less tangible, and my outdoor space like it's where I really dwell and dwell with God for that week. So that's one of my favorite traditions.
That's very cool. Well, my stepdad would build a sukkah every year, and we would get, so he had like, I think the sides were like fabric that were like, it looked like batik or something. We would go to a friend's house who had lots of like ferns and put them on the top, and then we would hang fruit from it. And he still tries to do it every year. So we used to sleep in it when I was a kid, but I admittedly have not done that in a long time. Are you in a phase in your life where you enjoy entertaining in your home? Why or why not?
I enjoy it, and it happens very rarely. And I was talking with my partner about that last night in preparation for this question, saying, well, why is that? And we were saying, well, because it can be kind of a lot to get ready for hosting people. And then I thought about it and said, yeah, but it depends. You know, if one person comes over, it's no problem at all. And we hosted a party a few months ago that we just did potluck style, and that was pretty easy too. So I think I want to make it an intention to host more, because I always find it so fulfilling, and I love feeding people.
Yeah, it's funny. I ask this question a lot because I love to hear people's answers, and we've had a few really good tips. One is potluck, and actually, it was Stephanie Boy who gave this tip, and she said one, potluck, and on the other end, let people help you clean up, because so often we're like, no, just go and I'll take care of it. But if you let people help you, it just makes it so much easier, and you can do it more frequently. Mm-hmm. So I'm still working on that too, on both sides of that, but I like both of those ideas. And then my sister, Jennifer Golbus, who was on one episode, also said, like, just don't worry about how your house looks. Like if it's messy, nobody cares. It's just people want to be together. And I think those combined are great advice. And also I think like just having an intention, and then maybe we get it done more often, because really at the end of the day, it's just about spending time with people. So do you have one or two top resources, books, websites, podcasts, courses that you could recommend? It could be related to anything. I mean, we've talked about so many different subjects. And while you're at it, while you're responding to this one, please remind listeners how to find your webcomic.
Go to Webtoons and search for Father.Mother.God, or just type in Father.Mother.God on Google, actually, and you'll get there. Also, my favorite book about grief is The Smell of Rain on Dust by Martine Prechtel. It's like reading poetry. After my process with my dad, I thought I need to write a book about grieving because there isn't a good one. And then I found his. And then I thought I don't need to write a book about grieving anymore. In terms of podcasts, in terms of Jewish related stuff, I would say listen to Judaism Unbound. It was a
Judaism
pivotal
Unbound.
part of my story and journey.
Amazing. And my last question, what do you do for yourself? I mean, obviously you're doing the webcomic, which is work and healing at the same time. But do you have a practice, a focus, a habit, or daily routine that contributes to your success or well-being?
Yeah, my most consistent practice that I actually do every day, even when everything else has fallen apart, is making a set of choices that give me a foundation and an orientation for not only my day, but I renew the choices approximately every 9 months or so. So they give me a kind of a medium-term roadmap of where I'm heading for. And I get those choices from an intuitive, creative visualization practice that I do. And this ties into the intuitive work that kind of undergirds all of the work I'm doing with the webcomic, but all of my life. And that comes from, I mean, it has some of its origins in Robert Fritz's work, and you could read his book, actually, The Path of Least Resistance. And then I've done a lot of training in kind of what's called the natural success curriculum. And that's where the choice work specifically came out of that I do. But that's an anchor for my day. That, as well as doing kind of a automatic writing process every couple of weeks. That's also a way of tuning into higher guidance.
The choices, are you making the choices every day, or you make them every 9 months and look at them every day?
I look at them every day.
And are they
say them? It's like I actually make the choice over again, but I'm not making new ones. They're the same 11 choices.
And are they written down or in your mind?
They're written down, but they're in my mind. I memorize them. So
Okay.
that it's kind of the first thing I do when I wake up.
So you wake up and do you say it out loud or in your own head?
I don't usually say them out loud. I say them in my own head. But what's important is that rather than just run through them as fast as I can remember them, I actually take a moment to experience choosing it and tuning in to see if there's something, if I get a hit about it, about what I might do that day that's related to that choice.
Do you ever, when you're tuning into it, say, I don't want to make that choice anymore?
Sometimes when it's towards the end of the 9 months or so that I've been doing it, I might feel like these choices don't have as much verve to them anymore. And that's kind of a tip to me that it might be time for some new ones. If I've brought a lot of what's in that choice to fruition, or if it no longer feels relevant in some way, then I can feel that. But there's never been a time where I said, oh no, I'm over this. This was a bad idea, because they come from a place of intuition and higher knowledge. So they can't be wrong.
Yeah. They could be done, but not wrong.
Yeah.
Play, I honestly can't thank you enough. You've given me so much time. It has been such a joy talking to you. I knew it would be, talking to you before and then listening to other podcasts. So I'm also going to put links to the other podcasts that you've been on in the show notes, and just getting to know you is really an honor. And I look forward to the final chapters of your webcomic through the end of the year, and to watching whatever you do next. And I'm hoping I'm going to have some event you could be a scribe for in the future.
Yeah.
And I really, honestly, it's just been an honor. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ashley. It's been really great to be here.
If you enjoyed the show, please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you're listening. It helps us reach more people who just might need these conversations. If you have ideas for future guests or have feedback, you can reach out to us by visiting onthetable.with.ashley.com, linked in the show notes. On the Table with Ashley is presented by our elevated everyday home brand, Amatond, which you can find at amatond.com. That's AMEATENDRE.com. You can follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Amatond. And you can learn more about products related to the Death and Dying series at amatond.com. Thanks for listening.